Like we are just getting started. If folks are joining us, welcome. So welcome to the Act Now Tuesday Talk. My name is Heather Peeler and I'm the president and CEO of Act for Alexandria, and I'm just so glad that you are joining us for this afternoon's program. Today we will be talking about rental assistance and eviction prevention and mitigation. I'm sure many of you have been following the news and many of the issues that are arising due to the pandemic that are influencing many Alexandrians and their ability to pay rent and stay in their homes. So we'll be taking a deeper dive into that topic today. Just to talk a little bit about housekeeping before we get into the program. As attendees, you are all on mute, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. There is a chat bubble down at the bottom of your screen, as well as a Q&A link. So please feel free to post a question at any time or add your thoughts as we hear from our panelists. Also, we are broadcasting on Facebook Live, so welcome to anyone who's joining us on Facebook. Please feel free to post any questions or comments that you might have in the Facebook comments, and we will be able to share those with our panelists. So today I am joined by three fantastic community leaders, and looking forward to taking a deeper dive and learning more about the work that they are doing on behalf of Alexandrians. First, we have Melanie Gray. Melanie is the Director of Outreach and Mission for Christ Church. In her role, she provides leadership and oversight to parish members who deliver ministries, and she also coordinates with local agencies and the faith community of Alexandria and collaborates with national and international partners. Melanie convenes the Emergency Assistance Providers Network here in Alexandria and has previously served as the convener of Hunger Free Alexandria. Welcome, Melanie.
Thank you.
We are also joined by Mary Horner. Mary is a staff attorney with Legal Services of Northern Virginia, and she represents the Alexandria office, where she serves low-income, elderly, and disabled residents of the city, and assisting them with any issues related to housing, consumer law, or elder law matters. Mary serves on the board of directors for the Alexandria Bar Association, the Alexandria Law Foundation, and Dunbar Alexandria Olympic Boys and Girls Club. She's a graduate of the University of Richmond School of Law. So welcome. And then we also have Sami Bourma. Sami is a community activist with Unite Here, Local 23, where he's helped organize a property-wide rent strike with his neighbors at Southern Towers, advocating for rental relief, as many of the residents who work in hotels, restaurants, airports, and cleaning services have lost their jobs as businesses were ordered to close and shut down in order to stop the spread of COVID-19. Sami is also an advocate for health and safety precautions in his building to stop the spread of the disease. And then prior to the pandemic, he worked as a cafeteria cook for the National Institutes of Health, and he was also an Uber driver. So welcome, Sami. We're glad to have you.
Glad to be here.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you each a few questions, and then we'll open up the floor for Q&A. And I just want to remind everybody to post comments or questions as you have them, and we will share them with the panelists. So, well, before actually we dive into the details of the program, I did just want to provide a brief overview of the Act Now Fund. So the Act for Alexandria and the City of Alexandria established the Act Now COVID-19 Response Fund earlier this year to provide emergency funding to nonprofits that are delivering critical services and programs to help Alexandrians who have been impacted by the pandemic. And since March, the fund has raised more than $1 million from generous community members, many of whom are on the call today, and as well as companies, private and family foundations, faith-based groups, and civic organizations. It really has been kind of an all hands on deck effort. The fund has awarded more than $900,000 in grants to 80 local nonprofit organizations who are serving Alexandrians. And so, in fact, Legal Services of Northern Virginia and Christ Church Lazarus Ministries our two grantees, and we'll learn a little bit more about the work that they are doing and how they are supporting Alexandrians. Okay, well, let's jump into the program. First, let's start with Mary. Mary, will you tell us a little bit about Legal Services of Northern Virginia and the work that you're doing, especially now in light of the pandemic, and tell us a little bit more about the eviction moratorium, what it was, and why it's important for us to know about how some of these legal or legislative issues are impacting people's ability to have housing.
Sure. Well, let me just quickly reiterate what you stated before. Legal Services of Northern Virginia is the largest legal aid organization in Northern Virginia. We are a nonprofit organization, and we provide free legal services to anyone who qualifies. So those who are low income, disabled, or elderly, like you mentioned before. We do more than just housing. We also do some family law issues. We are now doing unemployment as well. That's something we've shifted to during the pandemic to assist those who are applying for unemployment. So we do a broad range of legal issues that we can assist with. I specifically handle housing, consumer, and elder law issues like you mentioned. Let me first talk about the eviction process and what's going on, and then I can talk about what Legal Services is doing to address the landscape that we're facing here. So I've described this where we're at now in different waves. I've said phases, but I'm going to say waves instead, just because it can get confusing with too many different phases. But the eviction crisis that we're facing can be broken up in three different waves. So wave one are going to be those cases, and we're looking specifically at the docket and how many eviction filings we're seeing. We're just at the beginning of this issue, but wave one were those cases that were filed pre-COVID. So those individuals who had fallen behind perhaps in February or early March, and those cases were filed prior to the pandemic really hitting Virginia hard and our court system closing. So those cases were filed initially, and we had about 450 at that time. Those cases were not able to come to a resolution until the court system opened up. So for some of those individuals, they continued to accrue delinquencies in their rental payments. Some people were able to catch up, but those 450-ish cases were considered wave one. And then there are wave two cases. Those are cases that were not subject to any other protections, and I'll talk about those protections in one moment, but areas or communities like Southern Towers would fall into this wave two set of cases. Those are cases where someone fell behind due to COVID. So you might have lost your job, were unable to pay your rent starting in April 1st, and maybe it's because you had to stay home to take care of a loved one, or your work shut down. You might be waiting for unemployment assistance that's backlogged and hasn't reached you yet, but for some reason you have fallen behind in rent due to COVID, and you don't have any protections to stop the eviction process for you. There was a moratorium in place in Virginia, but that moratorium unfortunately ended on June 29th. So over about a month ago, almost exactly. And so that are the protections here for those individuals who are not subject to some other type of protection, such as the CARES Act. The evictions have proceeded for those, or could proceed for those individuals, which is why I like to break them apart. And then the largest wave, which I think we have yet to even see really the extent of this issue, but is those individuals who are subject to the CARES Act, or so the CARES Act, for those who are not aware of the protections under the CARES Act, if you live in a covered dwelling, so basically the easiest way to describe this is anyone who lives in some type of housing, subsidized housing, whether it's public housing, Section 8, or perhaps the building that you live in is subject to a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac backed mortgage. Sometimes you don't even know if you live in one of these properties, but if you live in a covered property, your landlord is not allowed to take any eviction action against you until the CARES Act moratorium ends. So that moratorium actually also just ended on the 26th. So those protections for not taking any action ended that day, and at this point, landlords are now free to go ahead and issue a 30-day notice of late payment. So these landlords, after providing this 30-day notice, can then pursue eviction action after that notice period has ended. So I would anticipate in about 30 days from now, we are going to really start seeing the full extent of the very beginning of this third wave of cases. Any individuals who maybe have fallen behind during COVID, but otherwise have had protections up to this time. Another issue, of course, and I think everyone might be aware of this, is the fact that unemployment benefits that have been expanded also end this week. So I think it's kind of a dual cliff here. Not only do the CARES Act protections, which have not yet been extended, perhaps they may be, but at this point they have not, in addition to the loss of these expanded benefits, which for many families is the only thing keeping them afloat at this time. With those two benefits being taken away or protections being taken away, we do anticipate that this third wave is going to be it's hard to even imagine how large it could potentially be. I think Melanie will talk more about some of the numbers and the people, residents who are in need that she's been speaking with. But, the range that is owed can vary widely from, low amounts, 1 month of rent, all the way up to several, up to 10,000 and more. And so some of the things that LS&V has been doing, we have been working very closely with our community partners. It's been a really, really great to see how well we've been able to work together. I've been working with Melanie. I've also been working with Sami outside of the courthouse, and I'll touch on that in a second. But we have a great group of community partners that have been able to work together to try and triage and make sure that we're keeping track of all of the cases that are going before the court for eviction hearings. We make sure so we have a table set up outside as well on those days in which there are an abundance of cases. So for today, we actually will have a table set up outside of the courthouse, and tomorrow as well, since there are several unlawful detainer cases on the docket. At that table, representatives of LS&V are handing out flyers with financial and food resources to anyone who comes by, to make sure that they're aware that there are resources in the city of Alexandria that are available to our residents, both financial resources, so rental assistance, whether it's through the city or through our emergency financial providers. And Melanie will talk about that more in a second. We also provide assistance for those who have fallen behind during COVID. You may have some protections that I haven't covered quite yet, but in Virginia, there is a new law that states if you've fallen behind in paying for rent due to COVID, you've had a loss of income due to COVID, you may request a 60-day continuance. You do need to bring some type of proof, whether it's an affidavit that states you've lost income, a bank statement, or some other document that the court determines to be reliable. So if you ask for that 60 days, that should provide you additional time if you're waiting for unemployment benefits to show up. If you need to seek out financial assistance from the city or from our emergency financial providers, or otherwise address the situation. And so that we are helping residents who come to our table fill out those documents and make sure that they're aware of these opportunities that are available to them. And so that's actually what Sami has helped me do. Sami has actually helped me, especially with residents of Southern Towers, fill out affidavits, or assist residents in filling out these affidavits to get more time. So that's the primary thing that LS&V has been doing, trying to make sure we have boots on the ground, that we're out, making sure our residents are aware of what's going on and the protections that are available to them, and also the resources that are available through the city.
And Mary, how do people contact you? How do they know about what services you offer? How do they get in touch with you?
Sure. So again, in order to take advantage of our services, you do need to qualify. So I always say, start at the beginning, go ahead and call our intake line, and I will have that for you in 1 minute. Mm-hmm. But so you can call, you can also apply online. So I recommend everyone go to our website so that you can get a better sense of the type of legal issues we can assist you with. But the phone number is 703-778-6800. That's the number to our intake line. You'll speak with someone who will gather some information, determine if you qualify for our services, and if you do, you'll be placed either on a callback line or scheduled with an attorney, depending on where you are in your case.
Great, thank you. All And so I think it's helpful to hear about the work and supports that you're providing to folks who are kind of in that crisis moment when they really are facing that threat of eviction. So I'd like to now turn to Melanie Gray at Lazarus Ministries in Christchurch. Melanie, can you tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing and then what you're seeing from community members and what you're hearing about the concerns that they have about paying for rent?
Sure. First, let me reiterate what Mary was saying. If you can imagine an actual safety net, and I know that word gets used a lot, but if you think about legal services and you think about the Office of Housing and the Department of Community and Human Services, the Sheriff's Office, the faith community, the nonprofit community, we've all been working together since the beginning of this pandemic, and we've been working together for years. And I think that's part of an infrastructure we've created that's working well from a macro level to a case-by-case basis. So I think that's something that's certainly going to help residents going forward. What we're seeing in Lazarus, since March 18th, we've returned 697 phone calls for assistance. We've been able to help with 516 requests at a total of $134,000. Now, in normal times, that would have been about $69,000 in that same length of time. So we're definitely seeing an extreme increase in need. What we're also seeing universally is intense gratitude from members of the community, for getting a call back, for getting a call from someone who cares and is asking how they're doing. And people are really grateful for no matter how much we're able to give, we're often not able to fix the situation because the amount that they need is beyond that. So we're working with our community partners to try and piece together the rent people need, which often we can't do as much as we try. ACT has been essential as an organization in allowing us to actually hire 3 contractors to expand our work. And that's been essential, especially with the bilingual community. And we're definitely seeing the west end of Alexandria and Arlandria being the hardest hit in terms of the people calling us for assistance. And we're seeing them as the most vulnerable. So we're often, in returning phone calls for financial assistance, we're doing way more in terms of case management and advocacy. And those things are very important. We've also delivered food to 249 families because you can have a roof over your head, but you still need to eat as well. So we're trying to be holistic in our interventions. So that's a summary of what we're seeing. I think the anxiety is definitely increasing as time goes on. I think we're also seeing people we never would have seen before, honestly. They never needed help. And as Mary said, I don't think it's going to slow down anytime soon. So
thank you for that, Melanie, and for that bird's eye view, and then also for all the assistance that you are providing to families and individuals that reach out to you. It's very concerning, I think, in terms of the volume of requests and the needs that, the extreme needs that people are experiencing. So now let's turn to Sami. I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about your experience and what you are hearing and observing from your friends and neighbors at Southern Towers. What are people concerned about with respect to rent and rental assistance?
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Mary, and thank you, Melanie, for all the service you've been providing in our community and the city, which is really awesome. It's like to see our city, it's like they have strong people, it's like helping one to another. And it's a lot of concern here. What I've been seeing in the past, I don't have a kind of like that connect with the city or with the residents until when I started kind of like almost a full-time organizer with the local 23. I've been with them almost 15 years, but I didn't come like a full-time organizer until like about 5 years ago. So during we organizing the Dallas airport, and that pandemic hit. So for a lot of our family members to be laid off, and then we started seeing what kind of issue we have kind of in our community, especially in Southern Tower. The first I start for myself, asking myself, now I've been laid off from 3 jobs, what I'm gonna do? So I started, like reaching out the people I know in Southern Tower, especially the people who have kids, like the friends I know. So, and that question if you're raising a lot, oh, we're being laid off now is like, we don't know when we're going to go back to work. And it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do if my money finished, and I don't know what I'm going to do with my rent. So that's one of the things is we start organizing Southern Tower when that concern start raising. So we can have some kind of like strong people to be able to come forward, to go and sit down with the landlord to see what kind of action we have during this pandemic. So when we get in turned back in all that situation, so I kind of like voluntarily after being laid off from my organizing job, I continue, reaching out to the people who I have on my list, to see how they're doing, what they're concerned about. So is a lot of from the beginning of pandemic, are people concerned how to pay their rent. It wasn't kind of like unemployment or they're losing how they're gonna catch up with the rent and how they're gonna deal with the landlord. That's what the first concern. So we're trying to get as many people we can, to go to have negotiate with the landlord. So what that things fall behind, we couldn't have it, and then it become a concern about the safety about the building. So that's which is until today is still issue, and a Southern Tower, which is like in the air condition, or if it's a trash room, or if it's a lobby, if it's elevator, or if it's a shutting water off time to time. So that's a concern is a more than rent cancellation problem, because as what I mentioned is a family place. We call it like our town is like when we be in the playground with the kids, they say our town. So that concern is start raising more than the only rent cancellation. So the things keep going and on, they start accumulating, when the people, they start being low in their, their money. And then at the time we start having a kind of like a Zoom meeting, trying to reach the city councilors, it's like I have a lot of people who really appreciate Melanie, what she be doing, a lot of people are being reaching out. There's some of the people really did get assistance. And then the big issue is 1,000 of them didn't get assistance, they don't qualify. The reason why they don't qualify is, and it's also in Tower, it's kind of like about 4,000 units. And those 4,000 units, like almost 2,500, all of them like Uber driver, Lyft driver, and taxi drivers, hotel workers. So a lot of them, they don't have a kind of like hardship document to be able to, to submit it to qualify for rent assistance. So that's becoming, is a really big issue. Even a lot of them until today, they haven't received unemployment because, like for some reason, they don't qualify for it, and then the people who qualify for the, for the rent assistance, they're still, struggling because they are behind already. And before the pandemic, they are struggling with their bills like a loan or a student loan or car loan or some other type of loan. So until now, is a concern is not only about the rent cancellation, is becoming about how we're going to survive. Now we know is unemployment is going to stop. We know it's like a lot of us, we haven't, qualify, for rent assistance. So the little money they have, if it's finished, all right, and they don't go back to work, what is going to happen? So that is the concern. Is now is coming more, scary, is more terrifying, especially when the landlord start taking, filing the court eviction. So most of the time, like the past 3 weeks, I've been meeting with some leaders in the Southern Tower. It's becoming the concern how we're going to survive if that 60 days extension, expire, what kind of action we have, what we're going to take our kids. There's some people, what I talk to, they don't have any other family to go to. They don't have like a, like a kind of strong friend can take them in, and then they have like 2 to 3, 4 kids, and I fall in that category as well, myself, I built myself in the United States in the past, 23 years, and my wife just came in, and she's for like 2 years. We're trying to build ourselves, so we have nowhere to go. It's just only in our hand. We trying to keep that community together, calling each other, sharing to each other information. Even sometimes we share the food, and I was like, cooking. We know that lady, she doesn't have enough. We just send it to her, and we have some different organization as well. They donate some kind of like grocery card. So we're using that to get to those family who's most needed, because a lot of people, they need it, but there is some people who most need it, so we distribute that kind of gift cards when they come to local community or to African community, we distribute that. So the concern is what we the people facing in Southern Tower, how to survive after that 60 days. Who they're gonna reach to get assistance when they don't qualify for housing assistance and they didn't get an employment. So that's one of the most concern would be facing during this pandemic, and not only in Southern Tower, in so many I've been in couple of different complex, talking to people to see what the situation there with the landlord. There's some of them, they've been doing good with the landlord, which is really awesome to hear. It's like in our community, in our city, there's a good landlords, they're trying to work out with their tenants. But there's some other landlord, it's just, which is their rights, you live in the property, you should pay. But, it's like, definitely we kind of like try to figure how, before we get to that crisis, being with our kids in the street, what kind of assistance, if it's from the city or from some organization or from the government or from the landlord, to those people not to be in the street, especially when during this pandemic still exists. So that thing is kind of rising, as what Mary said. Yesterday I was have a meeting with some other leaders in Southern Tower. They say like, each one of them kind of would get us, report every week. So some people already now, they start having 5 days notice. Some people, they started receiving an eviction notice. So the July one is done. Now we're facing the August one. So it's kind of like it keep rising, and there's still people, there's no job for them to go, and there's no job for them to apply, and then the unemployment is ending. So it's kind of a crisis we're facing in our town, during this pandemic.
Sami, thank you so much for sharing your experience as well as that of your neighbors and friends at Southern Towers. And it does seem like this is something, this crisis is something that is, as Mary was saying, is going to take place in waves. There's immediate crisis now, and then every 30 days, it seems like there's going to be a need. And we have one question from the audience about what the numbers of potential Alexandrians that are facing eviction might be. And so I don't know, Mary or Melanie, if you have any comments or thoughts on that, but what is the scale? I know Sami said 4,000 people at Southern Towers, with about 2,500 not being able to have the documentation that they might need for different kinds of rental assistance programs. But what is the, how many Alexandrians do we think are at risk of losing their homes?
So it's really hard to know that number. From the perspective, if we just think about the number of families who have been applying for rental assistance, and I don't have those specific numbers, but just from what Eric Keeler, he works for the Department of Housing, or the Office of Housing, and the city has a program of rental assistance, and that program alone, within 2 weeks of it opening, I believe had over 3,000 people apply. And so if you just think of that in a 2-week span, and early on in the pandemic, because we don't even know how much much longer we're going to be in the situation we're in now. We don't know when people will be returning to work or have some type of normalcy. So just capturing that, and that's one rental assistance program within the city in a 2-week period of time. Just that number alone, I think, is reflective of what is to come and what will be much worse. I don't know if Melanie, you have any more updated numbers, but
I don't have updated numbers, but I think it's important for the community to understand that you could have a person who needs $300 and we're able to fix that. And you can have a person that owes $30,000 and we're not going to be able to fix that, and they are going to be evicted. And so part of it is being prepared for them to be evicted because our shelters are full. So how do we, as Sami said, they have nowhere to go, how do we ensure their safety, knowing they will be evicted? And then you have a majority of people somewhere in between those two scenarios, where they're behind 1 or 2 months rent. And we're trying to sort of pace together the remainder, hoping that they'll have more hours. And we are seeing a good number of people who are returning to work whose hours are increasing. So we're seeing some hope that we can help get them to the other side. So there's like everything in between. But I think the Office of Housing numbers reflect what we're about to see, which is thousands of people.
Thousands of people. Yeah, so it's pretty significant. Thank you for that. We also have another question from the audience about how folks are working with property owners. And so I'm curious, maybe Sami, can you talk about your experience working with property owners at Southern Towers? And then maybe Mary, if you can share how through legal services you are working with property owners?
Sure.
Yeah, so with the property owners, as what I mentioned from the beginning of this pandemic, we try and, to see what kind of, help, they can offer to the tenants, because there's kind of a lot of the tenants when, like the layoff time, they hidden, they're trying to go to the, like management office to see that present themselves, that's what my situation is, what kind of offer I have to be able to, because for right now I don't have it and I don't know what the situation is going to be. So the first response we started getting from the landlord saying we no longer accepting money order or personal check. Just only you have to go online to create an account to make your payment this and other way. And then when the time started getting like middle of the month of April, and then the time we started getting like, oh, you come to the office and sign agreement, you'll be able to pay the rest. You pay 25 at the spot, and then the rest you pay by end of the month. That was in April. So when the issue started getting bigger, and then they came up with another assistant way to help the tenants, which is the similar to the first one, to come and pay 25% at the spot, with the signing another agreement with the collection agency, iCloud deposit, something like that, to pay that remaining balance in a period of 6 months. Mm. So we went there, we asked, that collection agency, what kind of a percent as they will charge people if they couldn't pay, and what kind of penalty is it? Those are no details. So the people started worrying about it, and there's some people went and signed that agreement. Mm. So now we start having those people who signed that agreement, they start coming back and complain. It's like, oh, that was a trick. It's like, how is it a trick? They said, because now I don't have a job, and then my money is gone, and then that agreement, it was just only for 1 month period. It's not like until when all the pandemic finished. So it's just for 1 month period. It's like you pay 25% for this month, and then the rest are gonna divide it to you in the 6 months. So if you're missing one payment, and then the penalty is gonna start hitting. So you're gonna accumulate more debt, and you didn't catch up with it. So that's one of the offering, experience we have with the landlord. And then which is from the beginning, as when they agreed to come and, I believe it's through the city councilors. I believe it's through, I'm not sure if it's through Melanie. They agreed to, have a Zoom meeting with the tenants to see, what concerned tenants have during this time. So that was on April 20th.
Okay.
They agreed to meet with us at April 25th. So April the 24th, and they called back and it's like, no, we're not going to negotiate with the tenants, and we're not going to have any agreement with the tenants. So that's one kind of like things that really the tenants kind of disappointed for that landlord. The first, it was like, it's a landlord might no longer agree is good, but when they came to that part, canceling the meeting, with the tenants, and kind of like a lot of tenants disappointed, it's kind of like it's not a good landlord to deal with.
Right.
And is the worst things is for right now is kind of like is a problem inside a problem. There's no way we can catch the number how many people is gonna having this issue, because there's some people now going to get the loan, especially like last month. That's why the people, they don't go to the court. They go get the loan and go pay their rents. And they're still unemployed. They sit down because they don't qualify for that kind of like housing assistance. So they go ahead and go get the loan or borrow from somebody they know he have some extra to help them. So get that loan and go pay the rent. So it's down the road is a problem. You didn't fix the problem. You just make it a problem more worse.
Right. Just kicking the can down the road, as they say. So it sounds like you've had some conversations with the property owners. Mary, is that what you're seeing too? In general, have property owners been pretty receptive to trying to develop different kinds of payment plans and schedules?
I would say generally, yes. In fact, I think Melanie might know a little bit more when it comes to individual landlords in the city as well. They work with landlords pretty closely, especially when they are working with, when they're sending off the rental assistance to the city. They do work with landlords to try and directly to make sure that whether it's preventing eviction or just working with them to make sure that tenants are able to stay. From our perspective, for legal services of Northern Virginia, we have kind of two approaches, and typically we're dealing with the attorneys on behalf, of course, of landlords. So I often, because I've been working in this role for a few years now, I've had some working relationships with attorneys, so I am able to reach out on individual cases. When I have clients who have court, I am able to work pretty well, and I would say that the attorneys here in Alexandria are really reasonable. That's not always the case, and that's not, of course there are exceptions, but generally they've been pretty understanding. They understand the situation and that this is difficult for all parties. And then my colleague Dipti Padikkidi-Smith, she is also she's working on a broader approach, because it's really important. I think we all recognize it's really important to have the voice of the landlords at the table as well. They're a part of this problem, and they're a part of the solution as well. And so she has been working on a kind of a coalition to bring together representatives of all of the Northern Virginia jurisdictions, but in addition, bring in landlords and those, the decision makers to be a part of that conversation, and to ask what do they need, what are the issues that they are facing, so that we do have a better understanding of the problem from all perspectives. And so there is hopefully, I don't know what the end result is going to be, but I think that it is important to have their voice at the table when we are coming up with solutions.
Right. Thank you, Mary. We have another question, two questions related to shelter capacity. And one person is asking, are we considering expanding emergency shelter capacity? And are we working with the two shelters in Alexandria to expand shelter services? I think I would respond to that by saying, I think we want to prevent people from getting to the shelters in the first place and keep people in their homes. But Melanie, can you tell me a little bit about how Christ Church is collaborating with other community organizations, other churches? You mentioned kind of partnering with others to provide all the support that people need to stay in their homes. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So, that is the goal, obviously, to keep people in their homes and prevent them from being evicted. And interestingly, we've been collaborating more with the shelters on getting people out of the shelter and into housing that they can afford and get the housing furnished to make room for new people going into the shelter, because that's a very proactive approach as well. That's important to recognize that people in shelter are ready to launch again. And then the Partnership to Prevent and End Homelessness is working to also look at the data, look at capacity, and look at emergency planning. But down to the nitty gritty, have we put people up in hotels? Yes, we have. But it's been very few. And often they have a plan, like they're moving somewhere else and they're in transition. But yes, we're all working very closely, and it is sometimes it's person by person, because each person is very unique in their needs and their resources. Yeah.
Thank you, Melanie. I can't believe our time is just flying by. It's already close to the end of our program. And so I'm hoping each of you, as we look to conclude our conversation today, and I think we could have had another hour just to go into some of the other details about what can be done to address the crisis. But can each of you just respond to what people who are tuning in and listening, what's one thing that somebody could do to help be a part of the solution and address the needs that we're seeing right now? So Melanie, why don't you start first, and we'll hear from each of the other panelists.
Okay. I'm just very practical and realistic, and money is the thing that would help us the most right now, but from my perspective, from the work we're doing, because when the money comes in, we're pushing it right back out, and it's being put to very, very good use. So that would be my.
Right.
Yeah.
And if people wanted to donate, where would they donate to?
I would suggest they donate to you at Act for Alexandria, because you do such a good job getting the money out to the community. Honestly, you really do. And we appreciate that tremendously.
Thank you, Melanie. So if people want to donate, you can donate to the Act Now Fund at Act for Alexandria. But also, I know Lazarus Ministries does take direct financial donations as well. And through the Christchurch website, will people find information about that?
Yes, if you go to the Christchurch website and go to giving, the Lazarus Ministries certainly accepts donations as well.
Right, thank you. Sami, what's your advice? What's one thing that people could do to be of help?
I would say that's the solution for this crisis, which is the biggest crisis, I would say kind of like, as what you just mentioned, like this is a money issue, at the same time is a living issue. So as landlord is a part of the solution, and then, there's a lot of good people, and they can be involved, like people can donate, to provide, being those family in the street. So it's a two different part of it. Is a landlord part of the solution, and the people who can, assist, to help, those families can be at a good piece of solution during this pandemic, because we are in the sub-crisis. We don't know where it's going to end.
Right, thank you. And Sami, are there specific nonprofit organizations that you work with at Southern Towers that you think that folks could donate to or connect with?
Yes, with Local 23.
Okay.
Yeah, United Here, Local 23, yes.
Okay, great. And looks like Brandy's posting information in the chat. So Brandy, if you can post information about Local 23, that would be great too. And then Mary, from your perspective, what's one thing that folks can do to help be a part of the solution?
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and just make the preface that this is my personal opinion. Yeah. And as a city resident, I do live in Alexandria. This is my home, this is my community. And I really think that the solution to this problem is going to have to come from both a local but also a broader level. And I do think putting political pressure, contacting your council members, contacting our governor, making sure that everyone is aware of that this issue, this is the tip of the iceberg. I just can't imagine without some type of broader intervention that it's how bad it really can get. And I don't want it to get that bad. I don't want this to be realized. I'd like for us to stop it before it gets to that point. So I think that that would be my advice, which is a little bit different. I agree with everything everyone else said. On top of that, also contacting your elected officials.
Great, thank you. Thank you all three for helping to inform us all a little bit about this issue and steps that we can take to be part of the solution and help bring some relief to families and individuals in need. So again, I wish we had more time to dive into the topic, and perhaps we can circle back in a couple of months and talk a little bit about where things stand and how the needs have evolved and how the community has really rallied, I think, to support Alexandrians who face potential housing crisis. So I want to thank Melanie, Mary, and Sami for sharing your experiences and your expertise with us. Our next Act Now Tuesday Talk will be on August 18th. We'll hear a bit more about how the faith community is responding to the pandemic. Rabbi David Spinrad at Bethel Congregation will be leading that conversation. He's an ACT board member, and we'll have representatives from different faith communities on the conversation. So thank you all for creating a little bit of time today to learn more about how the COVID pandemic is impacting our community and what we can all do to support our neighbors in need. So thanks, everybody. I hope you have a good day.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Bye.